Good morning and welcome to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. We're delighted to have you here. Even in a virtual format, it's good to be together, a community of youth, adults, and children sharing the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. I'm Dana Boyle. I use the pronouns she, her, and I serve on our board of directors. Every Sunday, our ministry team will be running a brief virtual social hour beginning 5 minutes after the postlude. It is a 20-minute session of conversation and sharing designed to provide a deep and intentional welcome to all. The Zoom link for social hour will be in the chat box. If you have a request for today's meditation, please put it in the Zoom chat box. If you're new today, please fill out a guest card. The link for that is in the chat box. Or if you're watching this recording afterwards, just go to the wbuuc.org website and click on the tab labeled Newcomers. We're having a two-part virtual class for people who are interested in joining our church today at 1 o'clock and next Sunday at the same time. You'll see a link for the class in the chat box. All are welcome. All are also invited to join our Wellspring program, which will start this Wednesday night. You can find information, including registration, in this week's e-news. Besides myself, service participants today include Reverend Jack, Reverend Roger, Nico Van Ostrand, and Cheryl Riley, with behind-the-scenes support from Aaron Scott, Amy Peterson-Derrick, and Reverend Sarah. Music today is from the OK Factor, Anna Eggy, Dick Connett, the First Unitarian Brooklyn Choir, and our own WBUUC Choir. Welcome to our church. Together we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place, which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes, fears, for here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything else other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place. Cheryl Riley will lead us in our chalice lighting this morning.
Good morning. Reflecting on our month's theme, I realized that I came to the awareness of the word intention rather late in life, when a yoga teacher asked me to consider what the intention of my practice was for that day. In later years, as I've honed my skill as a potter, I've discovered the importance of having an intention for a lump of clay that I may be working with. What do I want it to become? If I don't have an intention, I may be disappointed or surprised, sometimes pleasantly and sometimes not. I found this to apply to life too. If we wander through each day with no sense of its outcome or just a lot of things to get done, we can miss the opportunity to create or experience something that's really meaningful. But I have to admit that all my life, I've been the kind of person that tackled every day with a list of tasks and measured success by how many things I could get done. The concept of intention has been rather foreign to me. Retirement has been a pleasant chance to change my thinking and to consider more intently what I want a day to be, what kind of person I want to be, and how present do I want to be at any given moment. And I found I like that. So, I hope you will take a deep breath, look inward, and ponder what will give you meaning to this day. Thank you.
Please join me in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please join me in our hymn, It will be number 108 in the gray hymnal. My life flows on in endless song.
This morning's story is based on a true story, something that actually happened to me, or rather it's a reimagining of what actually happened, which I'm sharing today in hopes that you will reimagine it as you listen. And in that way, we will create something entirely new together right now with just one true event told and heard. Last summer, I made a couple of new friends. They're awesome and kind people who do everything they can to make the world a better place. Maybe you have friends like them too. They inspire me to be my best, and we're always creating and learning new things together. One day, my friends and I came upon a huge pale blob. It was just sitting there, taking up a whole bunch of space, and I'm not really sure why, but this blob made me feel really sad. I felt small and helpless. I just wanted to leave and pretend I had never even seen this pale blob. But since my friends are the kind of people who like to right the wrongs they come across, we couldn't just leave this the way it was. So my friends and I asked some of our neighbors, where did this blob come from? What is it doing here? Does it make you feel anxious too? The answer was almost always, well, it's always been there, but it's too big for anyone to do anything about. So we all just go about our day and pretend it's not there. Does pretending it's not there help? We would ask. And they'd respond, well, not really, I guess, but I can't do anything about it. None of us really liked the idea that that's the way it's always been, was somehow justification for everyone in the neighborhood having to feel bad all the time. We decided that pretending the blob didn't exist wasn't the solution. We wanted to do something so our neighbors wouldn't have to feel so worried all the time. But how could we show them that the blob wasn't too big for someone to do something about? We came up with a plan, as we often do, that was much more a starting point than an answer. We knew it would help, but the three of us couldn't quite figure out our way to a full solution to this whole blob problem. So we put our starting point plan into action. We called a meeting and gathered together elders and children and healers and weavers and responders. We asked them to tell their stories. There was an artist at the meeting too, and as the healer and the weaver and the responder and all the others, including my friends and me, shared our stories, the artist quietly got to work. She took the healer's story about helping everyone feel better, no matter how much or how little money they had, and painted a gentle blue rectangle, weighted and comforting. As the weaver spoke of empowering people by showing them their best selves, the artist painted a bright yellow ball glittering next to the rectangle. When the responder shared about shivering in the cold, scared but determined to defend the land from the great snake, the artist added a splash of green, sudden and strong. The other stories that evening were orange and purple and star-shaped and triangular and huge and small, and I got swept up in the wonderful imagining. And I wasn't the only one. All around me, my neighbors and friends were smiling and leaning on each other, and you could practically touch the feelings of connection and love in that moment. As the last words of the last story left the lips of the last teller, the artist swirled the last stroke of her brush, and we all took a breath in silence, which was broken then by an elder who quietly said, "I don't feel so hopeless anymore." That great blob that had brought so much grief and sadness to the neighborhood was no longer. It was physically still there, but the artist had transformed it into a canvas, infusing its pale surface with vibrant color and brilliant shapes. And now everyone who comes upon that blob is reminded of care and community, of warmth and strength and determination, of the people they are connected to. The people of that neighborhood were right, though. That pale blob was too big for anyone to do anything about. It took a whole community, 3 friends, a healer, a weaver, a responder, an artist, and all the others. And only then was it possible to transform.
Gathered together as we are right now with about 150 households, let's pause for a moment of grounded stillness. Feel free to close your eyes and breathe deeply with me for 2 steady breaths. Notice the ways that your body is being supported right now. And notice also the tendrils of connection to this beloved community that is woven together today through the magical technology that enables us to be together. As you feel the room around you slow down and settle into a moment of stillness, feel that same sense of stillness and slowness within you. Notice the expansiveness of your lungs as you breathe deeply, the breath of life. Sending that life and that breath now to whatever part of yourself needs it the most. Breathing in peace and breathing out love. This week has been a full week with joys and sorrows all around us, including a scary hostage situation in a Texas synagogue. We are grateful this morning for a peaceful release of the hostages, and we will continue to work toward broad interfaith coalitions. In and among this swirl of events, we notice the helpers. We notice the joy, and we notice those who take bold action against injustice. Let our deep breaths inspire us toward bolder action, toward a deeper commitment, and toward a lifetime of breaking down the chains that bind us and others. We have no time for passive hope, nor do we have patience for incremental changes. Our hope and our action are rooted in liberation, in a passionate belief that all of us need all of us to be truly free. In that spirit of broadening and deepening our community and widening our circles, today we breathe a breath of fierce advocacy mixed with compassion. We prioritize a sense of belonging, different from previous versions, co-creating a world of mutual support and care. Today, our community is holding these people in love and light. Cheryl Riley and her husband, Jim Cooper. They are in Maryland now with Jim's mother, Virginia, keeping vigil as her life begins to ebb at 97. Sally Caldwell and husband, Jeff Janicek. Jeff experienced some seizures this week and his health is continuing to decline. A prayer request for people living with long COVID and everyone affected negatively by the virus and the vaccine, especially my friend, Susanna Newell. Another request for Teal Bassett, her family. Her uncle is very sick and we wish him comfort and peace and the release of all his suffering. And Michelle Shaw and her family. Over Christmas, Michelle found out her dad has prostate cancer. He'll begin treatment as soon as he can be scheduled for the procedure prior to radiation. And now from this place of stillness, we speak out loud the names of those we are holding in our hearts and in our minds. Trusting that we can hold this all together. Blessed be, and amen.
Black people who are giving birth have the right to seek and find culturally sensitive care in the setting of their choice, including in-home birthing. The special collection today is for the Black Home Birth Initiative. It is a fund that covers the home birth fee for Black families based on the family's needs. As always, you can donate in 3 ways. On the WBUUC webpage, send a check or leave a check in the locked box outside the front office at church, or use the text to give option on the screen. No matter how you give, please indicate the word birth. And thank you for your generosity and faith in this life that we lead together.
Our reading this morning is from Enough is Enough by Reverend Bill Sinkford, April 5th, 2018. Reflections on his words at a rally marking the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. Our nation has chosen to celebrate the vision of small Black and white children sitting together at the welcome table, judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. Dr. King did use that image, but only after speaking at length about the bad check that Blacks and communities of color had been given, the promises that remained unredeemed. Enough is enough gun violence, Yolanda King preached. Enough police violence, enough poverty, and enough militarism, we can add from Dr. King's words, and enough watching progress turned back on so many issues. Enough is enough. It may seem to be a complicated message to criticize a saint. And as I said at the rally yesterday, there are critical elements of our vision of beloved community that Dr. King did not articulate. Women's empowerment and BGLTQ presence were areas of silence. But I have complete faith that Dr. King would have added them had he been allowed to live. Hopefully, we have learned something in the 50 years since his death. The critique of the way Dr. King has been used has always been part of the discourse in the African American community and in the progressive justice-making community. An article in The Guardian yesterday took this approach. Quote, "This week, the US will indulge in an orgy of self-congratulation, selectively misrepresenting King's life and work, as if rebelling against the American establishment was in fact what the establishment has always encouraged." This morning, I returned to the writing of Dr. Bill Jones, African American UU minister, theologian, and academic. In a piece entitled, "I Come Not to Praise King," written for the first published book of meditations by African American UU ministers in 1991, Bill wrote, "Of the ideological abuse of King's deeds and doctrine by those who want to negate his dream. I have a nagging suspicion," he says, "that white America desires to perpetuate a Black hero who fits its needs of oppression and not those of Black liberation. White adoration of King secures him more as a guardian of white interest than as a Black Moses to lead his people to freedom." To redeem Dr. King's death requires an embrace of the radical nature of his vision. Enough is enough. 50 years on, enough is enough.
and again will be never again. Over and over is over, and again will be never again.
Every Unitarian Universalist congregation in the United States is situated somewhere on this continuum between spirituality and social justice. At one end of the continuum is a total focus on the internal spiritual journey. At the other end is a total focus on social justice. No congregation, of course, is completely at one end or the other, and that's good because spirituality without justice is fatally flawed, and justice without a spiritual foundation is incomplete and difficult to sustain. Finding the sweet spot for a congregation on this continuum is often a point of tension. The location of this sweet spot also evolves over time as things change within the congregation and in the world beyond its walls. Compared to most UU congregations, I would say that White Bear UU Church is situated a bit toward the end of the spirituality end. And this isn't a knock on social action here at all. But even that work is more grounded in a spiritual foundation than is the case in many UU congregations. Without a doubt, the location of White Bear UU Church on this continuum is a point of tension. And like any tension, this can be creative or it can be destructive. Simply recognizing that the tension exists is a good way to help make it creative rather than destructive. It's also helpful to recognize that this tension is not inherently bad. So whenever I hear a concern from someone here that it's too much about justice, it's not enough about justice, I observe that there is a range of opinions here and that it's important for everyone to understand this is the case. This tension in UU congregations especially surfaces during times of widespread societal disagreement and strife. And we certainly are in such a time today. So sure enough, this tension has risen to the surface here and in a lot of places. More often than not these days, the focus of this tension is on race and on efforts to diminish white supremacy culture in our congregations. This focus seems to push a lot of buttons in our mostly overwhelmingly white congregations. I can tell you it is a lot easier to do sermons focused on spirituality or really just about any other social justice topic. We ministers tend to get a lot less pushback when we do a sermon about climate change, for example. And so the presence of this tension here is a reason why I am returning to it this morning after talking about it a little bit when I first arrived. The events of the past 5 to 8 years have pushed many of us in the UU ministry to focus more on race. High profile and all too frequent police killings of unarmed Blacks with rare legal consequences for police, a resurgence of blatantly racist and violent activities such as the Unite the Right March in Charlottesville in 2017, more winks and nods as well as outright cheerleading for racist groups and actions from politicians and leaders. These have all raised the urgency that many of us who are UU ministers feel about the issue. So I'm guessing that Reverend Victoria Safford felt that and so shifted where she was in the continuum between social action and spirituality. And I know I have also shifted. Not everyone appreciates this shift. So after doing several more spiritually focused sermons these past few weeks, I have some trepidation about venturing into this territory. But the life and dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once again calls me forward. So does my intention in my faith journey to lean into those areas that feel scary and complicated. And finally, so does my belief that racism is the original sin of this country, and embodying this original sin is something that comes with the territory of being a white American. If I am to be a spiritually whole person who strives to live justly, I have to wrestle with this sin in myself, in communities and institutions of which I am a part, and in the wider society. I can't just take a pass on this. There was an edge in Dr. King's words and deeds, especially in the later years of his cut short life. White liberals, me included, have too often downplayed this edge and cherry-picked easier things he said, taking his, for example, judging by the content of their character remark out of context and running with it. It is easy and it is tempting for those of us who are white liberals to stay away from his harder, edgier writings that especially are pointed at us. Writings like his letter from the Birmingham City Jail in 1963, or his 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. These are inconvenient writings which many of us consciously or unconsciously avoid. This is why I asked Reverend Jack to share today this reading from former UUA President Bill Sinkford, because Reverend Sinkford so clearly names this in that writing. The King family has made an edgy and inconvenient and compelling request this year as the King holiday approaches tomorrow. They are asking Americans not to celebrate the holiday until our government takes actions to protect voting rights. I'm going to attend tomorrow's Metro-wide virtual ceremony, and we'll watch the video keynote from the Northeast Metro area virtual observance, because these events do recognize the need for action. And I'm going to look for some ways to get more involved in this fight to preserve and protect voting rights. There are some ways to get involved suggested in last Wednesday's WBUC News. The question that Dr. King posed in the title of that 1967 book still speaks, I think. The title was, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Are we going to choose a path that leads to more chaos, or are we going to choose a path that leads to community? Certainly, this is a good question in January of 2022. As we survey the chaos that has engulfed our country over these past 5 years or so, including the insurrection a year ago. How did Dr. King conceive chaos? Not as unrest. He knew that a path of nonviolent resistance often involves unrest. As he outlined in his book, chaos is characterized by things like a persistent lack of access to quality education and jobs and healthcare, continued segregation in so many areas of life, even as laws have changed, and persistent grinding poverty and militarism. Chaos is the fact that if I shifted one zip code away when I lived in St. Louis, the life expectancy rate would have dropped dramatically. And that's along lines of segregation. I'm sure the same can be said in parts of the Twin Cities. I have faith that there remains an option besides continued chaos, a path that leads toward what Dr. King called beloved community. My favorite definition of beloved community comes from the Eighth Principle Project. More on that in the coming months. And that definition makes beloved community a verb rather than a noun. Beloved community happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, sexual orientation, backgrounds, identities, enter into an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care. And I believe that the only way those of us who are white can enter into such diverse relationships is if we fearlessly unpack and deconstruct white privilege and white supremacy culture in ourselves and in institutions to which we belong. And if we begin to learn what true mutuality looks like. So which path will our nation choose in this next moment of our collective history? A path toward chaos or a path toward beloved community? I don't know the answer to this question. Honestly, it feels like it could go either way, which probably has been true for most of our country's life. But I do know deep in my soul that the right choice is that path toward beloved community. This was the right choice in 1967, and 1977, and 87, and 97, and 2007, and 2017, and today. Dr. King wasn't so sure in 1967 when he wrote the book that we'd be around to face this question in 1977, let alone today, if we made the wrong choice. He wrote in Where Do We Go From Here? We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. There is an invisible book of life that faithfully records our vigilance or our neglect. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. We still have a choice today, King said. Nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. This may well be humankind's last chance to choose between chaos or community. That quote from Dr. King still packs such a punch. That's why the fierce urgency of now is the theme of tomorrow's Metro-wide MLK observance. We need to take a leap of faith, friends, that this fierce urgency of now still is operative because there still is time to move substantively down this path toward beloved community. But time is running out, I fear. Enough is enough, as Reverend Sinkford said. It's so easy these days to feel overwhelmed and hopeless. It is like there is a huge pale blob in our neighborhoods and in our country that feels too big for anyone to do anything about. What a spot-on image from Nico's story. But as Nico said, each person in each community finding courageous ways to lean into this work, each in their own way and with their own gifts, well, that's how this blob gets transformed. Thus, it has always been Let's get going. We have work to do. And I invite you to join in our closing hymn today, which is number 131 in our great hymnal. Love will guide us wherever you are. Let's sing out loud. I hope that you will join us for the social hour, which will begin 5 minutes after our postlude, and you can find the link in the chat. Our words of benediction today are by Reverend Tony Vincent from the first meditation book written by Black UU ministers in 1991. And these words are in our gray hymnal, number 732. Great Spirit of light and darkness, we gather once again to remember a fallen friend and nourish ourselves from the fountain of reflections. Open our hearts to the anguish of our pain, to the tired taste of swallowed tears, and to our unrealized vision. Justice makes tireless demands, and we grow weary. As we touch one another in common cause and with the Great Spirit in our midst, let us find the way and the courage to realize the dream which still lives within us. May you go in peace.